Welcome back. Yes, I did take a deep breath because we're about to get into quite a heavy discussion, but I think something all of us need to broach now because we've been in survival mode for the longest time. And this Monday, we are switching things up and bringing a little bit of light to a very important issue, one we've all come to deal with in one way or another. And that's pandemic PTSD. Illness, grief, job loss, social isolation, uncertainty, and other pandemic-driven stresses. And there have been a dynamic list of, they've contributed to an increase in psychological distress on a global scale. And today we are joined by a panel of experts to unpack this topic: clinical psychologist and award-winning poet Musa Winkosi Kanyele, motivational speaker and life coach Lucia Dramat, as well as our resident clinical psychologist Slendile Mbata. Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to encourage all of you guys at home to please share your thoughts, any insights, any questions. Give us a call right now, 021 110 552. But before we open up the discussion, let's hear from one of our viewers about how this pandemic has affected him.
Let's take a listen.
Good morning, Expresso. Thank you so much for starting my Monday off with such a pertinent topic. To some of us, the pandemic may have been a minor inconvenience, but to others like myself, it has changed me fundamentally. Unfortunately, I lost my mom to COVID last year, and although I was surrounded by so many loved ones, I've never felt so isolated. I am so thankful to therapy and to a handful of strong support in my life for getting me to a point where I'm comfortable to speak about this and to say that even though I'm still really sad and missing her, I am strong enough to get through this. And I hope that whoever is listening and has also experienced loss can take comfort by this message and by what you guys are sharing today.
Sure. I think a lot of people can relate to that message, and a lot of these are, so many people have similar stories at the moment. And I'm going to start it off with you, Musa and Slee. In terms of PTSD and in context with this pandemic, how is this possible, that this is affecting him, but how do people find ways to cope with all of the stresses going on?
So, it can be very, very difficult actually to cope. And one of the things that the pandemic did was, because of the restrictions, was to actually take away a lot of the typical coping mechanisms that people have, like, social interaction, getting that social support, perhaps going to the gym, interacting in social activities. So coping has taken on very different forms, and a lot of people have found themselves perhaps reaching out for therapeutic support for the very first time. And, finding ways to cope at home with other loved ones. So it really has been a challenge, I think, probably more than at any other time in our lives. Yeah.
And maybe, maybe we should first unpack what PTSD is, because we don't want to assume that everyone at home knows what PTSD is. PTSD is, of course, post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a persisting reaction to tragedy. I'm stressing the word persisting because that is what makes the distinction between the normal reaction to trauma or tragedy and PTSD.
And that cycle repeating itself over
and over. You get stuck in the reaction to the trauma. Unfortunate events happen in our lives. Tragic things happen. We get involved in car accidents. We lose our loved ones. There's a lot of loss that we have to come to terms with. The distinction with PTSD is that unlike coming to terms with loss or finding a way to go back to your normal functioning, with PTSD you get stuck in experiencing the trauma.
Okay.
And that cycle just keeps repeating itself. And this is I keep using the word dynamic because there are so many motivators here. Some of us lost everything financially. And you sit there, you're looking and thinking, how is this possible? How come the risk is a minor flu and I've lost everything? Everything. And there are so many people who've lost everything. Then I'll sit down and interview someone who's lost both parents and a sibling. how do you put this into context? Because every person is coming from a completely different angle. Why do some people suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome? Why are others able to bounce back? What is that defining factor that kind of sends a person in a different direction? Why do we have different skills?
I'll definitely say I'll let the psychologist dive deep into the psychology behind it, but for me, it's a focus on mindset. There has to be the self-awareness, and you have to know, okay, I am actually not coping. I need a little bit of help here.
It's okay not to be okay.
Yes, and then if you're focusing on your mindset, you're seeing where it's going. You're trying to fill yourself with the good. You're trying to encourage yourself. You know what you're thinking. These thoughts are not healthy. These thoughts are going in a bad direction. Here, I'm going to get some support. So if you're self-aware, if you have your mindset focused. And then the last thing I would also say that is vitally important is that you have to know, am I a fight, am I a flight, am I a freeze person? Some people, they look busy and they look okay because they're fighting, you know, they're making things happen. But they're not actually okay. So they look okay on the outside, and then other people completely freeze, other people just run away. They don't want to face it at all. So also being aware of how you're reacting. Sometimes it looks good, but it isn't actually good.
And it is okay not to be okay, because I guarantee you half the world, 90% of the world right now is not okay. But we're going to continue this discussion in just a moment. We are talking about vulnerability. We are talking about healing. And you can give us a call. 021-110-552 is the number to call. Maybe you've got a personal perspective that you'd like to share with us, something that could enlighten us, or maybe you just need to ask a question or need a little bit of help. We are here for you. Give us a shout.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. This is your Feel Good Breakfast Show, Expresso, and we are back with our panel discussion about pandemic PTSD, and it features our panel experts, Musa Kanyile is here, Lucia Ramat, and Sli Mbata. And earlier we explored some of the devastating effects that the pandemic has had on our mental health, and now we'll also be exploring the ways in which people have dealt with it. Now, we encourage you at home to join in on this conversation and share your thoughts and experiences. You can call us on 021-110-552.
Please, and it goes both ways. We want your advice, your insights as well, because we've all gone through this as a shared experience. And in fact, let's set the tone right now and hear from another one of our viewers who was brave enough to send us a voice note about how the pandemic has affected them. Take a listen.
Good morning, Expresso. Firstly, just wanted to say thank you so much for having this conversation. What I wanted to share from my end is the fact that I am a very social person. So when the lockdown happened, for me it was really a struggle not being able to be out there. Obviously, you were so used to being out there, being with people, and now suddenly you're isolated. So that was really something that I needed to adjust to.
I think a lot of people can relate to the isolation, and I think we've got a caller on the line who's joined us right now. I think it's Kim joining us on the line, and I'm sure has had their own particular experience through this, but something that I'm sure will hit on a few notes that we can all relate to. Kim, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you? Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Thank you so much for dialing in this morning. We'd love to hear your comment, your insights, or your question. We've got our panel sitting here ready to listen. What have you got to say this morning?
You know, mine is a comment. It's not really a question, but the challenges that one went through, you know, especially on the pandemic. Because during tough times, one would depend on a church. A church is another home for a place of strength. So for the fact that those were closed as well, one started thinking whether the church works or not. You know, you were isolated, you couldn't get help anywhere, and you couldn't even go to church.
Thank you so much for hitting the nail on the head, really. I think when it comes to our personal journey, I've certainly considered to myself what faith actually means. Where do you draw the line between kind of positive energy and thought and spirituality? When do you need to hand over that sense of control to a bigger power? How important is having your church, your community, your tribe, your people around you now? And why were we fighting so hard to have our churches be able to kind of do their thing? Why was it such a pressure point, do you think, through this journey?
Yeah, well, I think that church plays such an important role in society as far as, supporting us as human beings, not only churches specifically, but having some sort of spiritual discipline. Because we know that we're not only, physical beings, and it's so important to take care of ourselves physically, but we're also emotional beings, we're also spiritual beings. So there's parts of ourselves that we need to take care of, and church generally plays for a lot of people that very important role of taking care of them spiritually, uplifting.
Gives you a structure.
Yes, it gives you a structure, and it gives you a sense of support and being able to actually cope in very difficult times. So I think that's why people were really fighting to still have that space, because it helped them probably before the pandemic, and it feels like such a crucial part of everyday life.
Definitely. I actually wanted to know if we had to flip it slightly, instead of focusing on, the missing out on a lot of the connections we've had, has there been any good that came from actually, staying home, being isolated from certain
I got
people
7
and
months with
family?
my daughter. I got 7 months with my daughter, uninterrupted. I'd pay you $1 million for that any year of my life.
That's probably it. I think that community is important. Community is vitally important, whether it's a running club or church group or whatever it is, community is vital. But if there was some benefit, I am also a believer in interventions and intervals. And this period of lockdown gave people this interval where they had to think again, they had to reprioritize. And those people pleasers had boundaries. They didn't set the boundaries, but the boundaries were there, so they couldn't do it. They couldn't say yes to everything. And they could actually think, what makes me happy? What do I want to do? So a lot of the people I work with say to me, Lucia, I want to change my career. After these past 2 years, I don't want to work in corporate anymore.
I want to brew pineapple beer for the rest of my life.
Something like that. They want to change. And it's because they were able to gain some perspective during this lockdown period where they spent time with family and the priorities changed.
Musa, now that we know what's important to us, and I think everyone will start at the top of that list, family. Connections with the people we love, most important resource element of our lives, but we have to go back to work. We've got to try and recover. What is a normal time to recover from something like this? Is there a precedent for recovering from this? Because it's been such a personal journey. When do we need to start putting pressure on ourselves to say, okay, we should be bouncing back now? And when is it okay for us to say, it's all right, you're still in the fight here? Because it's only been a year post-lockdown. So it's not like we started this journey, yes, I know, 2 years ago, but most people have only just started recovering now. Talk me through the time frames here.
I don't think it would be fair on us to put any time frames because we've never experienced such a thing, such a tragic thing before. If we think of our collective trauma as South Africans, we think of life as a Demeni, for example, where over 140 people were killed there, and we think of Marikana massacre, where just over 30 people were killed. With the pandemic, we are looking at over 100,000 people. So this has shaken us in unimaginable ways, and so I don't think it would be fair to put a time frame to this, because this is something we've never dealt with before. Our lives are gradually shifting. Just recently, we're able to walk around without masks for the first time in like over a year.
Yeah.
And I was just seeing on social media people graduating, and that has taken center stage recently. So there are so many joys that we've
got those positive milestones
that
back.
we've got those positive milestones back, and because of that gradual shift, I think we are also finding ways of really looking at our lives differently. What is this new normal?
Yeah.
And so I think I wouldn't say I would put a time frame to it, but it seems like things are gradually shifting.
Yeah, and I think now we can recognize those positive milestones, those new anchors we can set down to mark off where we are in our lives, because things have changed. Maybe it's only looking back that we realize how far we've come, but we are all in this together. We are talking about healing this morning. 021 110 552. If you want to have your say, ask any questions, give us a call.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. We are back into our discussion about pandemic post-traumatic stress syndrome. So many of us have experienced it in some form or another, and we've got an amazing panel of experts, Musa Kanyele, Lucia Dramat, and Slee Mbata, all here ready to answer yours and our questions this morning. And earlier we explored our reactions to pandemic PTSD, both positive and negative. Now it's time for our experts to share some helpful tips, some positive life hacks to get us through, even if it's just the next step. But before we do that, we encourage all of you guys, please, to join the conversation, share your thoughts, your insights, your experiences, and any questions. Give us a call, 021 110 552. We'd love to hear from you. But before we do that, let's hear from another one of our viewers who was brave enough to send us this voice note about how the pandemic has affected them.
Good morning, Expresso. Thank you for the question. I think there was a lot of adversity during these times, and I know something that happened in my family was my parents, because they were forced to be together and spend a lot of time during lockdown, it actually made them realize that they didn't have a healthy relationship, and they ended up getting divorced.
Wow.
But at the same time, me and my partner, we finally had time to spend time with each other because we were working such crazy lives. And it brought us closer together. So that was the kind of the positive that I took away. So it really opened people's minds to what was happening in their relationships.
Great comment, because, I mean, this is it. It's not extreme trauma for everyone, but everyone's been affected in different ways. It just makes for such an interesting dynamic moving forward. Why was this such like a get real period for all of us? Because it feels like now there's nowhere to hide. There's no more space for any superfluous nonsense in our lives. It's all got to matter.
Yeah. I think, I mean, for one, the fact that we're all facing a very, very serious issue altogether, but it's also, as I said, it was the drastic change in our everyday life. So now our working hours are different. The physical work situation, the workspace is different. A lot of overlap happened for some people between their work lives and their home lives. A lot of attention was being drawn to relationships, as the caller had just said. So there's a lot of things, I think, that really shed light on the nature and state of the relationships that we have. And I think for a lot of people, it made them really prioritize about what is important and really what doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, no, I got engaged, just before lockdown, and then the universe was like, let's see if you really want to get married. Let's give you a little global thing. You spend 9 months together and no one else and have a newborn baby. Let's see if you really want to get married. But thankfully, I'm getting married in 10 days. So
He is getting married pretty soon. Well, as
That's
someone
so
like
true.
myself that I check in with myself often, so I can pinpoint, okay, you're in an unhealthy space, it's time to make changes. Not everyone can do that. Musa, I'm going to ask you this question. Someone that's currently on that verge of that dark hole and they maybe not realizing they're in it, how can they get that wake up that they need and potentially seek professional help?
Yeah, good question.
It's a good question because, unfortunately, we live in a society where people do not access mental health services or use mental health services as much as they need to. And it's usually, for some people, unfortunately, when it's already too late. Suicide we usually see devastating news about someone who's taken their lives. And I think it's, how do you know that you're not okay? And what we found, it's a very complex question. And most people who struggle with mental health difficulties actually get to know that they're not okay by noticing a shift in
Consequences of their
in their
behavior,
in their physical well-being. So we know, for an example, that people who are diagnosed with depression, who get diagnosed with depression, come to seek help because they're struggling to sleep. They're struggling to sleep, they're fatigued. As a result, they can't concentrate. And those are physical symptoms, what we call somatic symptoms. And so mental health is so abstract that you actually need physical health to help you see that there is a mental health issue.
Okay.
You know, so there is
It's a system,
So there is that. So it's very difficult to know that you are not okay. But what the pandemic did was slow us down. And so the things that we use to distract ourselves from ourselves were no longer there. People go out clubbing, people do this and that, and none of that was...
Go to gym for 3 hours.
Yeah. So now that all of that was no longer possible, you had to focus on yourself. And that's why some people ended up divorcing. You know, because you had to look into your immediate space, because you can't go out now. What is happening right here in front of you? And you look around and you're like,
real for everyone.
I don't like this. I don't like this life. I don't like this life that I'm living. And so I think we need to make a conscious effort to introspect our
Well, I
lives.
think Zoe hit the nail on the head, but you've got to be able to check in with yourself. Now, you guys have these psychological, intellectual, emotional tools that many of us don't, because you live in this space and you're helping others. Lucia, I'm going to put this to you. What do you say to yourself to pick yourself up in the morning? Because I would imagine you've been through the tough times as well. What is your mantra? How do you get your head into a positive space?
One of the tools that I use that's so powerful, and anybody can use it, you don't have to be qualified, is ask yourself questions, but positive questions. Questions that's going to give you beneficial answers. So sometimes we ask ourselves questions like, why is this always happening to me? You know, so we ask ourselves these questions and it gives us negative answers and it makes us feel worse. But if you start asking positive questions, what am I grateful for right now? What is something that I can do? I might not be able to do everything, but what is one step I can take right now? What is something I'm proud of? When you ask yourself those questions, immediately you start to feel a bit better and those juices start flowing. And when you're feeling a bit better, you can take that better action. But if you're asking yourself, why me? Why does this always happen to me? What's wrong with me? Why am I not good enough? You go down this negative cycle. So forget those questions and start asking yourself questions that are actually empowering and beneficial to the way you think about yourself.
I love that. It is an opportunity to empower ourselves. We've learned so much about ourselves, about our social dynamic, about our work-life balance. All of this is, I have to believe it, an opportunity to lead ourselves into a better life. We just need our people around us, and we need that positive mindset. So we're going to continue, hopefully, building a little bit of positive energy in your headspace right now. We've got one more discussion with these amazing human beings. Don't stray too far.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
It's your Feel Good Breakfast Show, and yes, it's Monday. We are switching things up and bringing a light to a very important issue, one we all came to deal with in one way or another, and that is pandemic post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, we're joined by our clinical psychologist and award-winning poet. This is Musa Kanyile, as well as motivational speaker and life coach Lucia Dramat, as well as our resident clinical psychologist Slindile Mbata. Now, we've encouraged you at home to pick up the phone and share your thoughts and, you know, even experiences. That number is 021 110 5552. And we actually have a caller on the line right now. This is Anonymous from Cape Town. Good morning.
Yes.
Hi,
Good
Anonymous.
morning. We can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, we've got two callers on the line.
We've got two for the price of one. Okay, let's see who we're going to start with here. Good morning. This is Anonymous on the line. Shane, what is your comment or your question this morning?
Yes, I've got a friend. She was a successful teacher, but the thing is she was very paranoid when the pandemic hit. The thing is, what happened is she was so scared to go out, you know, and catching and obviously hearing of friends that lost family members to the pandemic and also people that you know. So she is still in that rut. She doesn't want to go out and she needs to get back into the workplace, but she is still not wanting to
She's still paranoid,
going to work or anything like that because of obviously suffers from depression and that now. And for financial reasons, she needs to get back into the workplace. So how do you help someone like that?
Such a good question. There are so many people trapped. You talk about cycles, being trapped in that cycle. I don't know, Slee, maybe you want to... Thank you so much, Anonymous. Brilliant, brilliant question. We've spoken about how people have been affected in very different ways. So many of us, I was joking about being agoraphobic and being scared of outdoor places, but for some people, it is a massive thing that has kept them, again, locked in this space. How do they break that cycle?
Right, yeah. And this is really a question of how you adjust after there's been an appropriate kind of fear or anxiety response to, what has been a very traumatic event for a lot of us. So I think the best thing that Anonymous's friend can do is to reach out, for therapeutic support. Okay. This seems to me to be the sort of thing I think where a professional can definitely get involved, and then possibly just work through how to reintegrate. I think, those gradual steps will have to be taken, but it might actually traumatize her more if she goes out too soon or feels overexposed.
Tries to force the issue.
Yes, it tries to force the issue. So definitely doing it with therapeutic support I think is going to be the best idea for her.
Because there are practical first steps. Just do the first right thing, the next right thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to do 10 steps ahead, the big leap, just that first step. I love that.
We have another caller on the line. This is Mona from KZN. Good morning, Mona.
Good morning.
What is your comment or question for our panel today?
So I have a comment and a question to your panel. Thank you for having me. So what happened to me during the COVID-19 pandemic was that I was actually living abroad in Europe, and I actually lost my job while I was living abroad. And the trauma that I went through with regards to mourning that job loss, as well as having to travel back to South Africa during the height of a global pandemic with a serious lockdown, was very, very traumatic. And I suffered a large amount of depression, and I'm not a person that actually suffers from depression, but that whole experience of going through a job loss, going through leaving a country, coming back home, but thank goodness I had my family. But with regards to the question and to the panel, what I would like to ask is that after that kind of trauma and loss, how does one go about rebuilding their confidence? Because a job loss generally is a traumatic experience, but coupled with the pandemic and having to leave another country and come back home was really a shock to the system.
Completely. It's like you had already made all these big choices about where your life is going, and then that got completely redirected. And you are not alone. I lost 2 massive television contracts. I was like, why? Who do I blame? What do I do? But the bottom line is her life had to change on the most radical level and then change back again. How do you bounce back? Thank you so much, Mona. Brilliant, brilliant question. Maybe, Lucia, I'll put this to you. How does she bounce back? How do we all bounce back from this? And how do we manage our expectations through that process?
I think one of the things that sometimes we hold on to a dream that we had 10 years ago, or a dream that we had 5 years ago.
Even 3 years ago,
You've changed and you've evolved. And so you need to reevaluate, what do I actually want for the next chapter? What does the next 5 years look like for me? You're allowed to start from scratch and have a different dream and have a new dream. And then remind yourself what you've done. Sometimes you have to look at the past for credibility, just to remind yourself, I've done this,
I'm a fighter, yo.
I've done this.
Yeah, I'm a survivor.
And then you look at the future with your new dream and your new plan, and you take the steps that you can take right now. You obviously can't change everything, but you can take the next few steps. And if you at least do that, you feel like you're moving, you've learned from what you've been through, but you're aiming to the future.
Okay, I love that. And sorry, I'm going to ask Musa here, in terms of a confidence, like rebuilding her self-esteem to be able to enter that job market again, have you got any tips on just really focusing on her self-esteem to believe that she can do that?
I think the first thing to do is to not internalize the job loss to mean that there's something wrong about her.
It was a failure.
That there's, it's not her fault, and this was completely beyond her control. And so that's the first step, because what that does is it reassures you that you still have the same skills and qualities that secured you that job that you've lost, and because of that you can still secure another employment. And so I think that would be the first place to start, to not internalize the problem. This is not your fault. This happened because of the pandemic, and then you build up from there.
Slee, do you want to leave us with any advice for the person who is at that juncture, maybe ready to hear the words right now? Because I think for a lot of us, we've been so trapped in our little bubbles that maybe we haven't been open or receptive. People are listening right now. What do you want to say to that person that needs that kick in the butt to get their life back in order?
Yeah, it's been really, really tough. But one thing I've learned is that as human beings, our capacity to bounce back is so immense. So just remembering that you are resilient, and I think like Lucia was saying, to kind of take stock of the things that you have been through already, because I think sometimes you can be so focused on the fear and the anxiety and what could possibly go wrong that we actually forget we have a track record of having survived a lot of things already.
Yeah.
So do take that into consideration. Remember that you have survived a lot up until now, and we can still keep doing that. It's just one more day. All you have to do is just do it for just one more day.
Yeah, man, no, I'm going to steal the words from Frozen 2, just do the next right thing. And don't look too far ahead. It might feel like you're more isolated now than ever before, but I have a feeling that we are probably more connected now than we ever have been before. As South Africans, as a global fraternity, we know where we are coming from. We know what we've all been through because we've all experienced it together. So share some of that love and support with the people around you, and don't be afraid to ask for help, please. And don't forget, we love you. Guys, thank you so much. It's been amazing this morning.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. It is your Feel Good Breakfast Show, and this is a Motivational Monday. We are back with our pandemic PTSD discussion, and we'll be focusing on how we can use the adversities that we faced during the pandemic to help us build closer relationships with the people we love and the people around us. Now, let's embrace the positivity that came out of the suffering and the loss of a loved one, and we'll be continuing the pandemic PTSD discussion with international speaker and mind power expert Robin Banks, who joins us in studio. Now, we encourage you at home to also join in on this discussion and share your thoughts and experiences. Our telephone lines are open. That number is 021 110 552.
So let's set the tone right now, and thank you so much to all of the viewers who have sent in voice notes and messages this morning. Right now we're going to chat to Jasmine, and this is her talking about her experience during the pandemic and how she took her days step by step. Take a listen to this.
Hi Expresso, thank you for letting me share my story. COVID has been tough on me and my family. I lost my father to COVID pneumonia. We went to the hospital and they ill-treated us due to medical aid, which we did not understand why. I noticed some sudden change in family members ever since my dad passed, and I noticed that I was always for him than my mother. I always depended on him even for little things in life. I grew a very well relationship with my mother for this almost a year now, and even with my sisters. Like the way I started moving forward, I just told myself, take your day step by step. You can do it. Everything goes on. Life goes on. Always keep my father in the heart.
Oh, Jasmine, we are so sorry for your loss. It gets so real when I hear stories like this. Despite what many of us have lost materially, people have lost those closest to them during this pandemic. And I think this has torn families apart, as we've heard from you. So how can we use the loss to draw us closer together with the other people that we still have with us? Robin, I know it's quite a coup having you here this morning, so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Despite this being a very negative premise, we are seeing some positives around this space. But for someone like Jasmine, you could hear in her voice, what she was saying was more for herself as an affirmation, more to herself to say, you can do this, just take it step by step. Where are we right now? What conversation needs to be happening in our heads. What's going on in your mind? You've got to motivate other people. I know. How do you stay motivated?
Well, first of all, I just want to say to Jasmine that my heart is feeling so... I feel her emotion. I feel for the loss, and for many people who've had that experience, including my brother who lost his wife. So many of us have lost loved ones. And I'm reminded of Eckhart Tolle. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
What an amazing author. And I'd really recommend people out there who are going through pain. He's got a number of books. One of his books is called The Power of Now, and the other one's called The New Earth. But in The Power of Now, he says something which I think is so poignant to what Jasmine was just saying. That the best way out of pain is through pain. And so often what happens for us, especially in my world, where, you know, like, come on, be positive, you can do it.
Yeah. Yes,
That's not the spirit. That's not what motivation is. Motivation and inspiration, in fact, I prefer the word inspiration because it's in spirit. It's coming from a deeper place than motivation. And by the way, motivation is great. But in this situation, I think what we're looking for is inspiration. Go within. And so when we think about the best way out of pain is through pain, is that if you are feeling the pain, don't deny it and say, I shouldn't be feeling this way. You're feeling the pain. Feel the grief. Feel the sorrow. Now, there's a big difference between feeling a feeling and becoming a feeling. And what often happens for people is when they're feeling anger, remorse, sorrow, regret, they think it's going to be this way forever. Jasmine, I promise you, this too shall pass. And any of us who are experiencing pain. Now, how long, I cannot say. And so when you're in a dip, allow yourself to feel, oh, I'm feeling so much grief, I'm feeling so much sadness, I really miss this person. If there are tears, let the tears cleanse you. And then you'll find that there's a time when you actually find things start shifting again, and then you'll find there's emotion again. So what I'm going to say is ride the wave, don't resist the wave.
The grief is part of the healing process.
The grief is part of the healing process.
Definitely. Well, Robin, we actually have a caller on the line right now. Colleen from KZN, good morning.
Good morning to you.
What is your comment or question for Robin Banks?
I just wanted to mention 5 days before the lockdown, the initial lockdown, I lost my husband to cancer. He died in the bed next to me, and I went straight into the lockdown. I managed to get him cremated. I'm all on my own, and spent 3 months without having a funeral or seeing the family or anything like that. But I'm a very strong person. I first of all didn't want to go back to work, but of course put my big girl panties on and went back to work. And yes, it has helped. It gives me a bit of a drive. And I have good days, bad days, and really, really bad days. But I'm hanging in there and I'm doing what I can.
We are so sorry for your loss and what must have been absolute torment after that, being caught in that cycle. So we certainly can relate to you on that matter, but I can scarcely imagine what you must have been through. Robin, what do you have to say to Colleen?
So what I'm going to say to you, Colleen, similar to what I was just saying to Jasmine, allow yourself to feel the grief when you feel the grief. But another message that I think you might find useful is that the mind loves analogies. And so I'd like to give you an analogy that the mind is like a TV with no off switch. You can't switch it off. But here's the most important thing. You can choose the channel you want to watch. Now, often what happens is, so when I said earlier, feel the feeling, don't become the feeling. So on one aspect, Colleen, when you're feeling the grief, feel the feeling. But there's a very big difference between allowing yourself to... And my sensing, just from listening to Colleen, is I think she's managing it extremely well.
She's doing it, yeah.
I think you are doing very, very well. And I think the fact that you went back to work, that you took those steps, and kudos to you. But what I am going to encourage you to do is be very conscious of what you are feeding your mind. The other analogy I want to give people is I'd like to say, think of your mind as a garden of rich, fertile soil. Any seed that you sow
it's going to grow.
It cannot be any other way. If you put tomato seeds, you get tomatoes. You put carrot seeds, you get carrot seeds. You put weeds, you get weeds. So the thing is, it's not about the situation, it's how we think about it. Good and bad things happen to all of us. It's never about what happens. It's the story we make up which either empowers us or disempowers us. So for me, Colleen, what I'd focus on, and consciously focus on, is the gratitude of what her relationship with her husband gave her. Really be thankful of that. You can even journal it. In fact, make a list of what were the things you loved about him and appreciated about him, and celebrate his life. Celebrate what you enjoyed. And then, now start focusing, okay, so what's my new life going to look like? Without feeling guilt and how can I move on, because actually you do need to at some point. And by the way, it's been 2 years, so it's a short period.
It's fresh still.
It's fresh. It is fresh. But again, what do you want to focus your energies and attention on? So what books do you want to read? What shows, like for me, I love this show. This is such a great show because it's giving people hope and giving people inspiration. And so really, I hope that she finds that useful. It is very good that you are able to move on. And again, as I said to the previous caller, feel the feeling, don't become the feeling. And the best way out of pain is through pain.
Oh. You've got to push through it. And Colleen, I'll just add to it from a partner's perspective, by virtue of the fact that you are fighting as hard as you are every day right now and doing what you're doing, I can guarantee you that your husband would be so proud of how strong you're being right now, but you can't be strong all the time, so it's okay to ask for help from the people around you. Robin, we're gonna bring you back, my friend. I think probably for another week, and of course we've got to broach a whole new round of COVID discussion. We're going to bring the medical experts in tomorrow to talk about the possibility of a new wave and where our headspace should be, what we need to be doing to protect ourselves. To all of the experts who have come in today, thank you so much. And hopefully you at home have garnered something out of today's discussion, but keep those words of motivation coming for each other on our social media platforms. We'd love to share as many of them as possible. Thank you. Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.